Quite a few years ago, my youngest son, Richard, had his house broken in and had his car stolen. And of course, he was just heartbroken because his wife's wedding ring was stolen among the things. And in addition to that, just the idea of someone coming into your house unannounced, uninvited, breaking in, stealing your things, and then taking your car. Well, some few days later, my son was talking to a man who lived not too far away from him there, and he told him about that. And this fellow said, that's such and such a gang. And he identified the gang, and he said, I know this gang. He said, I used to be a gang member myself. And he says, I turned away from that, and I became a Christian. But he says, I still know the men in that gang, and strangely, I still have a good relationship with them. He says, I'll get your car back. And so he did. He went, and this man went and contacted the members of the gang, and he told him, he said, you get that car back, and you give him back the things that you stole from him. Well, in a day or two, the off-ramp that my son always took when he's coming home, there at the bottom of that off-ramp sat his car. Somehow or another, this fellow who used to be a gang member had persuaded the gang members to bring the car back and to give the things back that they had stolen. My daughter wrote this out for me, and she sent me an email quite some time ago. She sent me an email telling me that story. I didn't know about that. And as I read that email, as I read that story, I just thought to myself, and as a matter of fact, she wrote this on the email, that people's hearts can change. And I ran into that by accident this past week. And I looked at it and I said, that is Sunday night's sermon. People's hearts can change. It really happens. And then as I was looking around and thinking about this, I thought, instead of telling you how people's hearts can change, I'm going to ask you, how can people's hearts change? And so I'm anxious to hear from you about some of those things. And then we'll talk about how people's hearts change. And in a sense of the word, I guess you could say this is more like a class than it is like a sermon, because we want to exchange some of these ideas. I really wanted a blackboard up here so we could write all of your things down. But what I'm going to do, I've got a piece of paper here, and as you tell me what you think motivates people's hearts to change, I'm going to write them down, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about those things. Joe?
An experience with someone who had a very rough manner and was very hard. One day she had a small crisis, but no big deal, and she started to cry. And I said to her, you know, it might be a good idea if when you cry, you think. People usually categorize your thinking and emotional, whatever, but people thinking and think about your life, think about everything. Mm-hmm. When you're in that state, you see from a different perspective. She started to do that. And little by little, she started to see things, some things anyway, in a different way, because she had never done that.
Well, what brought about the change in her heart?
I think that she was so, she is a Christian. She is a Christian, but she categorized things. Mm-hmm. This is being a Christian. This is my thinking process. These are my emotions. And it kind of wanted to gel together because she had And she could be emotional on occasions, but when she became emotional, it was always just the emotions. You know, I don't want to think about it, I just want to cry or feel bad or whatever, or joy or whatever. But I said, think about people that bother you, think about people
Okay.
who think might be a little too harsh. Think of them from their perspective in that state.
Okay, tell me some of the study. Tell me why you think people have a change of heart. Why not necessarily a story that Joe told, that's fine, but just how does a change of heart come in your own life? Yes, Leah?
When you keep doing the same thing over again, getting the same results, you finally get frustrated and maybe decide you need to do something differently.
They say the definition of insanity, you know, that thing, yeah? Yeah, all right. Somebody else, I want you to tell me what causes people's heart to change?
Someone doing something bad and feeling remorseful, then have a change of heart.
Why did they change their heart?
Feeling bad about what they have done.
Sorrow. Okay.
Well,
Rose?
change of heart, I mean, a change in your perceptions, the perspectives, because that's what a change of heart is. You view things differently because of some motivating factor. As a behaviorist, there's all of us, whenever something's happening to us, we need to figure out who's there, who's in that immediate moment. Are you either very happy, or you're very sad, or angry, or whatever.
But you view things differently.
Yeah, it's either functional, okay? If a cockroach is running across around here, it stops and goes the other way. Now, we people were as smart as a cockroach, okay? But we're not. We just keep going. But I think it's a change. It's a change like if I stole something from somebody and then I saw what it did to that person, how it affected their life, and I knew that I was the cause of this.
Okay.
Just like the gang.
Okay, yeah. Okay, anybody else? Okay, let me ask you another question here. Change of heart is really what the Bible refers to as repentance. That's a change of your attitude, a change of your heart, a change of your emotion, change of your thoughts, and so forth. So as I was thinking through this, I thought to myself, what makes me change my emotions? What makes me change my attitude? And I thought of, well, when someone does something for me as an act of love, that softens my heart. Now, reverse that. The way to change other people is to show an act of love to them. Does it always work? No, it doesn't always work. Jesus showed time after time after time, Jesus showed acts of love, but they certainly did not soften the hearts of everybody, but they did soften the hearts of some. I was just reading on the internet, just a few minutes before we came to begin. I was reading on the internet about the story of a young girl, 23 years old. That's not a young girl, really. It's a grown lady. But when you're 87, it's a young girl. This 23-year-old young lady was a straight-A student in college. She just graduated. She had a very interesting past because she had been abandoned as a baby and thrown in a dumpster right after the mother had given birth. She wrapped the umbilical cord and all was still attached. She wrapped this little baby in a black bag, tied it tight, and threw it in a dumpster. We don't know exactly how long she was in that dumpster, but there was a man who came to put some trash in the dumpster and heard this baby crying, and he thought, is that coming out of the dumpster? And surely enough, it was. And he ran in and told his wife, call the emergency, and that's before they had 911. Called the emergency room, and there's a baby in this dumpster. He went and got the baby, took the bag out, opened the bag, and surely enough, he saw this little baby. The baby had a fractured skull, had obviously been severely abused, and they took the baby to the hospital, and there's a long story about it, and ultimately they adopted that baby. The baby had a difficult time growing up because early on, this little girl overheard, I think at 6 years old, she overheard some people talk, a babysitter talking about her problem. She was abandoned by her birth mother, thrown in a dumpster, and that's the first thing she knew, anything about her adoption or anything like this. And it was such a sad story. But one of the things that really impressed me about this story, I wanted to write a letter to this young lady and tell her how this story had affected me. But one of the things about this story was that she said, I want to find my birth mother. And I thought to myself, why would you want to do that? Well, there's an organic connection as well as an emotional connection here that the rest of us probably don't understand because we were not thrown in dumpsters, and abandoned by our mothers like that. And she was questioned, why do you want to find your birth mother? She said, I would just like to know who she is, and I'd like to tell her that I forgive her. That just tore me up. And then I was thinking in terms of this of this lesson, and I thought, here is a radical change in the heart of this abandoned child. This abandoned child who was loved by some other people. And I thought, why did she say, I want to find my birth mother and tell her I forgive her? I could understand better if she said, I want to find my birth mother and beat the tar out of her. I can understand that. That doesn't say very much for me, I realize that. But the anger, the whole idea of abuse and abandonment of a newborn baby, that's just terribly hard for me to understand. And yet now, the soft and tender care of those people who discovered her, that soft and tender care gave them an opportunity to mold this young lady into a useful member of society. Change of heart. A change of heart. She had a hard time growing up with this because when the story finally came to her as just a little girl, accidentally, then she went and asked her mother, her adopted mother, said, did I come out of a dumpster? And then she had to tell her the story. I just thought so much, and this really was not a part of my prepared sermon because I just read it, but I thought so much how that fits into the things that I've written down here. We change because someone loves us. We change because we learn to love someone else. And that interaction of love and gratitude, these things make different people out of us. And it's so hard. It's so hard to come to grips with that sometime. So I put down, when I was preparing this, I put down, changes in behavior are not change do not constitute a change of heart. It's fairly easy for me to change my behavior. I can change my behavior. Instead of getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I can change my behavior and get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, or I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That has nothing to do with my heart. I can change my behavior and be nice to people. Not feel like it on the inside, but I'm courteous to people. I can change my behavior in so many ways, and basically that doesn't constitute a real big problem. But the change of heart comes about because there's some kind of communication of love. I think that's just so important. In Joe's story, where he was talking about, she categorized these things. Joe, I'll bet you that somewhere along the line, she recognized that there was somebody interested enough in her to say to her, don't cry, think. So you don't stop and say, I'm going to show love to that person. No, there has to be something in us that just comes out and just says to us, that person needs you. And the love that's in your heart for people, that is something that accumulates over years, something that becomes a part of you. You seek out and find, who can you help? Who can you do something for? Well, I have another one here. Sometimes threats will change a person's heart. Threats change behavior long before they change hearts. But when for example, a husband is abusive to his wife, a husband is difficult to get along with, the wife may say to him, I'm leaving you. I took a Dale Carnegie course one time, and one of the sessions, it's a communication thing and sales and all this sort of thing. One of the sessions, it was the assignment was bring something to the class and make a speech about it. It's got to be an object that has meant a great deal to you in your life. Well, we all brought something, and then we make a little 3-minute speech about what it was, why it was important to us. One fella picked up a suitcase and carried it up to the front, and he set it on the table. He said, that suitcase saved my marriage. And then he told the story. This sounds crazy, but it's true. He said, one day, I made for my wife, I made a list of all the things that she ought to do. Not a very good idea, I don't think. But he made this list. And he said, here's the kind of wife I want you to be. She went and got a suitcase, handed it to him, and said, pack up and leave. And so the suitcase, all of a sudden, he came face to face with who he really was. And when she threatened him by saying, get out of the house, I don't want you in my life anymore, it was kind of a moment of truth for him. He realized that by doing what he did in an unloving way, telling his wife what she's supposed to do and so forth, he realized, well, now this is not showing love to my wife, and my wife is not going to put up with this. Now I'm getting ready to destroy my marriage because of my own self-centeredness. So I just wrote down here, sometime when threats come to us, they pound down on us and make us stop and think of who we really are. Can we relate that to the Bible? I think we can. I think of Peter's denial. Oh, Peter was so confident in himself. Lord, I'll die for you. I will never deny you. And then someone comes in and says, oh, you were with him, weren't you? No. Oh, didn't I see you in the garden? No, not me. And then a lady comes in and she says, oh, you're a Galilean. I can tell by your accent. And he swore and cursed and said, no, I don't know this fellow. And about that time, Jesus, who had been on trial before the Sanhedrin, he came out. And it seems that Peter and Jesus met eye to eye. He caught his eye. And then he went out and wept bitterly. Here is a situation where a man had to come face to face with himself. And he felt within himself, I think, very, very keenly, he felt within himself that for the first time in my life, I see who I really am. And sometimes that helps us in a change of heart. Peter went out and wept bitterly. Let's look at Judas in a very, very similar circumstance. Judas, it seems to me, thought that he could make money off of this. And he did not think that Jesus was going to die. He didn't think they would condemn him. He's the Son of God. He's the Messiah. Ain't nothing bad going to happen to him, okay? And so he betrayed Christ. And lo and behold, if you read all four accounts of this, it comes very clear that Peter, I'm going to get this right, Judas, that Judas thought that this was an opportunity for him. And then when it didn't work out the way he had anticipated, instead of going out and weeping bitterly, he went out and hanged himself. What's the difference in these two men? One man came face to face with who he really was, but his love for his Lord caused him to go out and weep. Remorse, yes, but a change of heart. I've denied him. I'll never do that again. A change of heart. Judas, I betrayed him, but somehow or another, the veil was pulled down and he was not able to change, or at least he didn't change. Coming face to face with who we really are sometimes helps us in a change of heart. Understanding one's self. What do I mean by that? Somebody tell me. Understanding yourself.
I would say, we paraphrase please with a man got to know his limitations, and knowing your limitations, you know how far you can go.
Okay, that's part of this thing, isn't it? And understanding yourself. What are my limitations? Sometimes that can be a hindrance to us, where we see our limitations as much more strongly than we see our opportunities and our capabilities. Rose?
I think it needs to know why.
To know why.
To know the whys of why you do what you want, why you work for what you do, why you act that way.
Rose has hit on a very difficult problem, I think. I wish that I knew why I did some of the things that I do. I know why I know what I tell myself about the why, but is that the real why? is, did I, for example, well, I've heard preachers say this, and it just always irked me to hear that. They will talk about, well, I'm telling you this because I love you. And then they'll just lambast somebody, you know. And so I've always wondered, is the motivation there really because I love you or because I want to tell you off? And so what I say sometimes is not really it isn't really the essence of the thing. So understanding oneself, it's sort of like David said in the 19th Psalm. That is a lovely psalm, by the way. And David said in that 19th Psalm, he put it as a question. He says, who can discern his own errors, his own faults? It is so hard to look inside. I remember when I had a course in psychology, one of the important things in psychological therapy was called introspection. And what it simply means is I've got to come to a point where I get honest enough to look within myself. I think that Jesus quite constantly taught this. I think that Paul taught this very frequently in the epistles that he wrote. And one of the philosophers, I think it was Plato, said, "Know thyself." It's hard to do. When I taught communication at Vienna, we had a little section there that talked about the self. And a number of different categories here. One is the self that I project to other people in my daily life, and my neighbors, my business associates, and so forth. The self that they see. And then another self is the self that my family sees. That's pretty different, by the way. That's very different. My family sees me pretty much as I am. My family sees me with my weaknesses and my strengths. They see me in like my good moments and in my bad moments. And so it's very difficult sometimes for us to put up with how our families see us. And then there was another one about how do I see myself? And the interesting thing was the author was not writing the textbook from a Christian perspective, but in how I look at myself, he said something along the line, we are so easily deceived about ourselves. Because I see myself as a pretty nice guy. Does anybody see himself as, I'm really a no good, dirty so-and-so? No, usually people don't see themselves that way. John Dillinger, the old criminal, who was so famous back in the 20s and the 30s, John Dillinger felt like that he was a greatly misunderstood man, and that in his heart he says, I'm a good person. Well, it's so hard for us to see ourselves the way we really are. And so it's difficult for a change of heart to come about when we don't have help from the outside. And I go back to the very first things that we were talking about, that when I do an act of love, when someone does an act of love for me, it has a change that comes over us there. I want to tell you a personal story. We're very small group, and we know each other. I don't think you're going to take this the wrong way. I was in a grocery store, or in a store the other day. There was groceries there, and I was looking, and it had a big candy counter. Okay, and I was looking at some candy, and on the other side there's some cookies, and I was really looking for some lemon cookies, and a little girl, about that high, I guess, 5 years old, something like that. Just a real cute little girl. And her grandmother was with her. And they were looking for some candy too. And she had on a bright red T-shirt with the St. Louis Cardinal insignia, you know, the cardinals and the little branches and all this. And she had that on, and she was just as pretty as she could be. And I spoke to her, and I said, "Oh, wow, that is really a pretty shirt, isn't it?" And she just, yeah. I said, "Do you like the Cardinals?" "Yeah, I like the Cardinals." And then her grandmother spoke up, and she said, she got 2 hits today. Apparently she was playing the girls' little league. Says, she got 2 hits today. Oh, you know, she just brightened up and everything. And I bragged on her about those 2 hits. And then I reached in my wallet and I pulled out a $1 bill and I said, "I'm going to give you this $1 bill for those 2 hits." Well, it just, you know, you can imagine a little girl like that. Well, you can't imagine me, though. I went away from that. This is bad. I went away from that little encounter feeling so good because of what I had done to bring a little bit of cheer and joy and happiness into the life of that little girl. And I told somebody, I was reiterating this story, I said, you know, that feeling lasted me 2 or 3 days. And it did. It lasted me for a good little while because I saw here, well, I saw in myself something that was good in bringing happiness and joy to other people. And I will have to tell you, it did make my heart a little more tender. I think that a change of heart comes along to us sometimes because we do things for other people who haven't done anything for us. And you know, just that little encounter with the little girl. I don't know whether she'll tell anybody in the world that she got that $1. It doesn't make any difference to me. Giving the $1 made a great deal of difference to me. Well, I have one other thing here. Facing one's opposition or one's adversary can change one's heart. Rose said, viewing things differently. When I take a look at people who oppose me, and instead of having an attitude of anger toward them, I try to have an attitude of love. Love your enemies. That's a very difficult thing, to love your enemies. I asked in the sermon the other day, about 3 weeks ago, I said, have we prayed for the Boston bomber? The Bible says, pray for those who despitefully use you. What am I going to pray about? Well, I don't know. I'm going to have to let the 8th chapter of Romans come in there, because there Paul says the Spirit helps our infirmities because we don't know how to pray for the right things. And so just to pray for those people, though, and to come face to face with those who oppose us. Paul was greatly persecuted. Paul had difficulties. Paul had enemies. I think that Paul prayed for those people. Rudy said sometimes sorrow. Yes, sometimes sorrow makes us change our hearts. There's a variety of things that cause us to change on the inside. And so when we stop and think about the change of heart, let's not think in terms of just our behavior. Let's think instead in terms of our inside, our spirit. Changing my spirit, changing my life, not from the outside, but from the inside. And the change of heart has to do with that. Let's stand together and sing, please.